home stretch here on Inside the Paint. We're going to take you right up to 11:30. And Steve brought up a comment in the chat. He said, and he's right. He put a little clown emoji for people who try to draw conclusions for one game. And he's exactly right. And that's what Eric Spoelstra tries to tell us over and over again. And sometimes people don't want to listen. It's this series is going to take on a number of different lives. Mm-hmm. And it's going to change with a different crew of officials. It's going to change when guys come back from injury. It's going to change now that the Heat are more accustomed to the physicality that Boston is going to bring, and that Boston is more accustomed to the type of physicality that Miami is bringing on the perimeter that they didn't necessarily face from Milwaukee. Milwaukee is extremely physical inside. On the perimeter, they will give you more than Miami does. And I think that's kind of what you saw in the second half last night, where the Heat made things very tough on Boston at the three-point line. So I mentioned that this series is going to change when the guys come back from injury. What are you hearing right now? What is your feeling? And you mentioned before we got to the end of the last segment about what Ime Udoka said about Al Horford. And I want to start there. Why would he be able to come back, unless maybe this isn't a positive test? Why would he be able to come back for game two for any other reason? Is there some other reason if it's not a positive test?
Yes, an inconclusive test. And we've had players who've missed a day. The question is, why was he testing in the first place? Especially it's been reported, at least reported, that he's vaccinated, which means he wouldn't be required. Now, still flu season, still colds going around. So he might have felt under the weather, felt the need to take a test. It might have come back inconclusive. Or the feeling is it's such a light strain and the load, the NBA measures load. And even if you have COVID and your load is below a certain, they call it spin ratio, that you can come back. So maybe the thought is in the interim, he can pass two tests. Because here's the deal, Clay. He played in Sunday's game against the Bucks. The NBA has a clock where the day you test positive is day 0. You then must go 5 days before you clear their quarantine. So let's say after the game Sunday goes, you know what, we won. I don't feel too good. Okay. So that's day 0 he tests, which would mean Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay. Well, Thursday is game 2. So all logical aspects of the NBA policy says he misses that. Not only that, if he practiced and was with the team either on Monday or Tuesday shoot around, because again, Ime Udoka said he didn't find out till 2 hours before he did his pregame press conference. That also would put him out of Saturday's game 3. So I am a little surprised. This whole policy is a thing in the works. A bunch of people at the game said yesterday, why is he testing anyway? Look, down here, the measured rate, that's not even just us testing at home, various people, is like 20% now. So it would seem 1 in 5 people could test positive if it comes from that. So I think the NBA is trying to have it both ways. They're trying to maintain vigilance on one end, but they want good playoffs. We've already seen Steve Kerr miss games during the Western Conference playoffs. We've seen Scott Foster, the lead referee, best referee in the NBA by their ratings most times, miss a game during the playoffs also. So the thought of after 2 compromised seasons, including everyone talking about the Heat in the bubble, folks just listening here on your podcast, those were air quotes.
I'll do the air quotes, yeah.
It seems like, it could happen again. And again, I always digress because it's who I am. And I can't stand this crap for this reason. Are we going to go back to this now, Clay? Well, the Hawks didn't have Capella for the first couple of games in the first round. And Embiid didn't play the first couple of games in the second round. And now there's no Horford and no Marcus Smart. It's like, stop it, people. This is the NBA. Magic Johnson missed the finals. Byron Scott missed the finals. This happens. This is decades going back. Dwayne Wade was injured in the playoffs. LeBron James cramped up. Players are out. You miss players. But also, Boston got to the East Finals because Chris Middleton was out, right? Boston got past the first round because Ben Simmons and Joe Harris weren't available. So you have to pull back. So my point with the Horford thing is it's very much in the air because I think the NBA's policy is sort of, we'll just go with this today. I think that's what it is.
Do you think it could be, before you move on, do you think it could be as simple as Ime Udoka just wants to create just some mystery and force the Heat to still game plan? Which, by the way, I think I think he's well within his rights to do that. But when he said that, that was my first thought was, hey, if it's an automatic 5-day clock, then he's got to be just trying to make sure that Miami has to game plan.
And I disagree with you there, Clay, and not just because Big O said we should disagree. I disagree with you for this reason. If the NBA is going to be part of gambling, and you see on all their courts, all their gambling signs, all their live sports betting, okay? And the NBA at one point wanted to be paid a transparency fee by Vegas and all the sports books so they can keep it above the line. Clay, if you watch enough sports, you're seeing now, and we're seeing it on the national broadcast, the live in-game updates about how the lines change. So if Ime Udoka knows, or the NBA know, that Al Horford can't play in game 2, and they're trying to say they're all in on gambling, then they've got to be more like the NFL. They've got to have transparent injury reports. Point number 2, to your point about coaches don't want other people to know, so Eric might have to game plan for Robert Williams and Grant Williams versus Al Horford. All well and good. But even in game, PJ Tucker limps off midway through the second quarter. We don't know anything until the third quarter. But as you know now, Clay, with live gambling, the line is constantly changing second by second by all these NBA partner betting sites, as is the over-under total. We've got to get to more transparency. We can't have Lisa Salters on the sideline going, still no update from the Heat. No, if you're in for gambling, you're all in. The moment PJ Tucker goes out, what is it now? What is it 5 minutes from now? What is it now? Because the NBA seems to be more than happy for you and me to be gambling during the game in real time, but without providing real-time updates. So I agree with you, Clay. That's what coaches do. They give out as little information. Eric Spoelstra today at practice, hey, Eric, how's Kyle Lowry doing? Eric Spoelstra. Can't really do a good Spoelstra imitation. No new update, right? That's what we're going to hear about 2 hours from now. Well, you know what? If you're in a gambling league, there is an update. Same, copacetic, slight improvement, took a slight step backwards because we're all gambling. If you folks only knew how much money Clay owes to the bookmakers. But I digress, and I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Why do you think I'm doing this show?
Exactly, to make up for his losses. They go, when are you going to pay us? That's the Al Horford story. Marcus Smart, a midfoot sprain can be an issue. And here's the deal. This is a guy, sort of like Bam, who goes 1,000 miles an hour, who's going to dive into every pile. So all of a sudden, pins and needles, all of a sudden, that will he get up this time? Is he hurting the foot? Because you know what? Clay, I'll give you a perfect example. Last series, you remember how Danny Green got injured? Do you remember that play?
Hold on, sorry about that. I was trying to read the chats and muted. Yeah, I mean, Joel Embiid rolls into him.
Exactly. So it can happen by the most benign accidental things if you're on the floor. That's why I cringe every time that Jimmy Butler goes down or every time that Bam Adebayo falls, because there's lots of other really big people on the floor like Robert Williams who can fall, or Dwayne Dedman who can fall on top of you. So I don't think this Marcus Smart thing is just going to be he's back and he's good to go. I think it's going to be, again, pins and needles the whole way to see what we're doing and whether he can make it past it. So I think Marcus Smart stays on the injury report the balance of the series. Then you have the Kyle Lowry issue. Eric Spoelstra has told us, and I wrote about this at the Sun Sentinel at sunsentinel.com, that he is not basing any of this on where the Heat stand in the series or the other team's injury report. I don't buy that. I think Eric Spoelstra is trying to buy time until critical mass. Critical mass never arrived against the Hawks in that series with the 4-1 series. Critical mass, honestly, never arrived against the Sixers, never really in trouble in Game 6, always had Game 7 in their back pocket. So personally, and I might be wrong, and if you're listening to this podcast time shifted and not on Wednesday, maybe I will be wrong, I think Eric's still playing the series, and they're up 1-0, and he could buy another 2 days off for Kyle by sitting him out on Thursday. So I think he is playing the series, and I think he is playing things. If Boston says Marcus Smart is back, I think that impacts Eric Spoelstra with Kyle Lowry. Because you know what? You have to still win 3 more games in this series to get to the NBA Finals. Again, this is, I know it's almost rudimentary, but for our new listeners, the old you lose your home court advantage if you lose one of the first 2. Clay, it's true. If the Heat lose on Thursday, we're going to have to do the emergency pod on Friday about how it's all going to crap. So I think Eric Spoelstra knows you can't get too cute with whether Kyle plays or Kyle doesn't play.
Yeah, and I think the only reason why I would push back on the idea that you're going with how the series is going is that when they brought back Kyle Lowry in Game 3 against Philadelphia, he wasn't just below 100%. It was rough out there. It was hard to watch him play.
What percentage would you say he was at?
50.
Okay.
I mean, and for this reason, Ira, it was the shooting was clearly off. He clearly didn't have the lift. But also the bigger problem I noticed was defensively. He was slow in rotations. And I mean, there are just certain things that you can't do when you've got that level of injury. And so to me, Ira, it's more about are you better with Kyle Lowry in his current state, whatever it is, than you are with Gabe Vincent at 100% in that starting lineup? And
And
here's the
that's
other
a really
question.
good point. And that's the question I kept going to Big O on when I was on with our accurate Pembroke Pines reports before we got here for our weekly Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint was I kept going through the percentages. I did this with you last week also. So again,
Yep,
Kyle Lowry at 90%, do you play him Clay Ferraro?
of course.
Kyle Lowry at 80%, do you play him Clay Ferraro?
Yes, but Woj mentioned yesterday they may bring him off the bench. Have you heard anything along those
Kyle
lines?
Lowry has not played a game off the bench in any game he's appeared in, I believe, over 800 games. So
Wow.
do you want something that dramatic and change for Kyle? He has missed games over that span, but when he has played, he has started. So again, that percentage. So you waffled at 80.
Let
So
me tell
I'm
you.
going to go to 70. But I think if
Hold
you go
on,
to
stay on
75,
80.
you're out.
Stay on 80 for a minute. Stay on 80.
Okay.
That's when I would play the series. To your point, that's
You
where I
play
would
the
look
series
at
result, right? You play
Yes.
if they're even or if they're up 2-0, you wouldn't play him at 80 then.
Correct.
You're up
Yeah.
2-0.
So if Boston were to come, let's say this is the hypothetical 80% world, and
Sure.
so the fact that I'm getting hypothetical with 80 tells you where I'd be with 70. In the 80% world, if you lose game 2 and you can look back at certain points in that game and say, man, we needed him on the floor. And there's a reason why we lost, and part of that reason is that we did not have Kyle Lowry on the floor in that game. Then you're talking about this series taking on different lives as it goes on, and then you're like, okay, let's put him out there. And then maybe you steal a game 3 with him at 80%, and then maybe he falls back and you have to rest him for a game 4 and then come back in game 5. So I think that's where you play the series, is when you're getting to that percentage level.
Yeah, and again, here's the thing, and I was talking to Big O about this on our accurate Pembroke Pines report, is I felt that once you get below that 80% threshold with Kyle, you're in a good spot because not only do you have Gabe starting, he scored a career playoff high last night, but you had Victor Oladipo then slotting into the rotation without taking someone else's spot. Victor was kind of meh. Is that a good word for last night? He was kind of just out there. He had a couple of moments, but nothing great. So if I can get a little more out of Victor, I feel a little more comfortable sitting Kyle. Again, like I've told folks, including going back to last week's Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint, if I'm getting less than 80% Kyle, but I'm getting a productive Victor Oladipo, I'm fine with this. If I'm not getting a fully productive Victor Oladipo, then you move things around. But then you're getting into, does Victor play? Because yes, Caleb Martin played last night as a ninth man, but minimally. He was actually in the hallway riding the bike because he had played so little during the end of the game just to stay fresh in case he had to go back in. So I think Victor Oladipo plays into the Lowry thing maybe a little bit more than we're sort of giving credit for.
To digress a little bit, do you think that Tyler Hero would be more comfortable playing with Gabe Vincent if that's the direction they were to go? And in that case, do you think you would see less of Victor Oladipo with Kyle Lowry back in the lineup, where maybe your two guards in the next lineup would be Gabe and Tyler Hero, as opposed to Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo?
Yeah, I think Victor could get shuffled out of the mix again. You know, it's like,
yeah.
I feel so bad for him because every time we speak to Vic, it's almost like, I mean, I haven't gone to a lot of Sunday church services and those great sermons and gospel sermons. As a Jewish guy, you don't do that. But the way Vic talks, I always almost hear him as a preacher. He is so optimistic. He is so effusive. He is so he gives life to the room. I put it that way, Clay.
Yeah.
And I'd almost feel bad if there's a step back and I have to do the interview. Vic, you didn't play last night. How do you feel right now? Like, I don't want that moment because the man infuses life into the room when he's out there. But yeah, I could see that. If Kyle Lowry comes back, Victor Oladipo would be in jeopardy of losing playing time, maybe all of his playing time. Because I don't think any right-minded person who follows the Heat could say right now, just go without Gabe Vincent. Initially, I did think if Kyle was there and Tyler Hero was there, that Vic is my third guard in that situation. I don't think he can move past Gabe Vincent. It's so interesting. Every opponent's mentioned him. And I think as you and I, well, actually, it was after we did our show, when the Heat put out a GIF after last series of onward to the next series, they left out Gabe Vincent. And no less than Trae Young said, hey, don't forget about Gabe Vincent in there also. He should be in there. People are noticing. And when the Trae Youngs notice, and when the 76ers guards and Tyrese Maxey notice, look, mama, I've made it. And Gabe Vincent really has.
What I thought was fascinating about that was you remember that Gabe was guarding Trae Young a lot in that first series. And I remember maybe it was game 2 where there was a comment from Trae Young, oh, if the refs are going to keep letting him play like that, then there's nothing we can do. And Gabe somebody asked Gabe about that comment, and Gabe kind of smiled and said, oh, we've got plenty of foul calls tonight. And it was like, all right then. And for Trae to come back and say, it just shows the level of respect that they have. Last 3 minutes, Ira, what type of adjustments do you think we can see maybe on both ends? And obviously we're going to see this series shift as guys come back into the lineup. But specifically after what we saw last night, even with the guys that are going to be on the floor again, what type of adjustments could you see from both Boston and Miami in game 2?
You know what? I know it sounds weird, but I have to see who's playing. The adjustments might be in the rosters. The adjustments might be in the rotation. The Boston Celtics with Marcus Smart and Al Horford are a different team than we saw Tuesday night at FTX Arena. The Miami Heat with Kyle Lowry is a different team than we saw. A limping PJ Butler who played through on adrenaline at the end on Tuesday, but comes in today and goes, I can't move, is a different player than who we saw on Tuesday. So the biggest adjustment to me are the injury reports, are those hourly NBA injury reports that should start today at about 1:30 and will roll right through the night. That tells us. We also know teams, like you said, don't tell us a lot. So tomorrow's injury reports will say a lot. I don't think there are. By the way, I appreciate you getting on this real quick there, Sean. Exactly. This is the photo that the Heat ran. They're on to the next round. And no less than, as we see there, Trae Young saying, hey, Gabe Vincent belongs in there also. And he does. And it's interesting. So when you talk to me about adjustments and what we're going to see, you're not taking Gabe out of the mix, even if Kyle comes back. That's an adjustment. Who's the odd man out? Is it Caleb? Could it be Gabe? This is constantly going to evolve until we get steady rosters and steady injury reports. Clay, I could tell you this. If every Heat player played on Tuesday and every Celtics player played on Tuesday, I would talk to you about adjustments because X, Y, and Z player have to do A, B, and C. But that's not how the series is going to play out. There are going to be injuries. There are going to be absences. And again, elephant in room. Al Horford protocols. Al Horford practiced, traveled, spent time with teammates. Who's next? And again, I hope not. And not because I care if the Heat win or lose the series. That's not my job. Because I don't want to hear this BS and have to deal with it. Well, they didn't have Smart and they didn't have Horford. And tomorrow we find out they don't have Williams and they don't have Williams. And it just changes things. I want everyone to be out there. When players say that, that's not bombast. They want to beat the best. They know how much it means. So to me, adjustments, it's all on the injury report. Clay and I have already discussed. He's going to check through the middle of the night on the even hours. He has 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., and I have the odd hours. So follow our Twitter account. We'll keep you
It's
updated.
like we have a baby that needs feeding during the night.
Exactly. Feed the injury report. Feed the injury report.
The old show, my two dads, my two injury report monitors as the night goes on. This has been great. You guys have been awesome. I'm really curious as well, Ira, because to me, it's not just the guys who are in and out of the lineup. You can't, if you're Boston, look at what happened in the fourth quarter of that game and say, yeah, you know what, we're going to be okay. We think Marcus Smart being out there is going to be the difference between Jimmy Butler taking over the game and Jimmy Butler
was
not.
Superfluous. That game was decided in the third. I don't care what Peyton Pritchard's doing at the end. That third quarter is what they have to overcome. And you know what? If they get seduced by the fourth quarter, hey, the Heat are going all the better because that was not best of the Heat by any means in the fourth quarter.
Great stuff. We'll be back next week, guys, right here on Inside the Paint. The Big O Show rolls on next.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.